Okay, so you sent over this video called Transform Your Conversations, Storytelling in English Made Simple.
Yeah.
And right away, I was hooked by that statistic that using storytelling can boost engagement by like 70%.
Uh-huh.
That's huge. Like in any conversation, that's a major advantage.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So obviously, we're not just talking about entertainment here, right? This is about something much deeper.
Right. When was the last time you remember like a fact from a textbook?
Hmm.
But you can probably remember a story that like a friend told you.
Oh, yeah, definitely. A good story is so much easier to remember than just a boring fact.
Yeah, stories just kind of like cut through all the noise and connect with us emotionally.
Okay, so that makes sense. But like, what's the science behind that? Is it really all about emotion?
Oh yeah, for sure. They actually showed like a brain scan in the video.
Mm.
And you could see like the brain lighting up when
Ah,
someone's like really into a story.
yeah.
It's a physiological response.
That's so cool.
And this actually reminds me of something you mentioned about your presentation.
Mm.
Like you really want to connect with your audience on an emotional level,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So storytelling could be like a secret weapon.
Okay.
Instead of just giving people facts, you could tell stories to make your message more memorable.
Okay, I'm sold on the why, but how do we actually do it? The video had this cool analogy with like a recipe.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
I,
It shows that good storytelling has a structure, just like a recipe does.
right, so what's the first ingredient?
We got to start at the beginning.
Okay.
That's where you introduce the characters, the setting, hint at the conflict. Hook your listener.
Make them want to hear more. Okay, what about the middle?
The middle, that's where the action is.
Uh,
That's where you build the tension and keep people on the edge of their seats.
right.
Conflicts, challenges, raising the stakes. Without a good middle, your story falls flat.
Got it. So beginning, middle, and finally the end.
Exactly. The end is where it all comes together. You resolve the conflict, tie up loose ends, deliver your message. Like, what did the characters learn?
How did they change?
Yeah. A good ending leaves a lasting impression on the listener.
The video also mentioned making your characters relatable. How important is that?
Super important. If people can't relate to your characters, they won't care about the story.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you're experiencing the story through their eyes.
Exactly. Think about like your favorite books, the
Yeah.
ones you can't put down.
Uh-huh.
You're totally invested in what happens to the characters.
Okay, so we got the basics down. But the video had a bunch of other tips and tricks, like little spices to make a story even better.
Oh, yeah. Like using vivid descriptions.
Ooh, tell me more.
So instead of saying it was raining heavily, you could say something like, the rain was coming down in sheets dancing on the pavement, like 1,000 tiny ballerinas.
Whoa, that paints such a vivid picture.
Right. It's way more interesting than just saying it was raining heavily.
Okay, I'm writing that one down. What else?
Dialogue.
No.
Dialogue's a great way to bring your characters to life.
So instead of just describing what they say, I should actually let them speak.
Yes. It makes a story more realistic and helps the audience connect with the characters.
I like that. It's like we're eavesdropping on their conversation.
Exactly. It pulls the listener right into the story.
Okay, this is all so helpful, but I have to admit, I still have some doubts.
What kind of doubts?
Well, it's easy to learn about these techniques, but actually using them is kind of scary. What if my story isn't good enough? What if people don't like it?
That's totally normal. The video talked about that too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it said that everyone has a unique voice, a unique perspective.
Right.
And that's something to celebrate, not be afraid of.
So just be myself.
Exactly. Don't try to be someone you're not. Let your personality shine through prez. Authenticity is more important than perfection.
That's a good point.
Think about it. When someone's telling a story and they're being genuine, it's way more engaging than a perfectly polished but insincere story.
Yeah, I get that. But what about language barriers? I know a lot of people who are learning English worry about expressing themselves.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. But the video said to start small. You don't need to use big words or complicated grammar right away.
To keep it simple.
Yeah. Focus on getting your story across clearly and authentically. The language skills will come with practice.
That takes the pressure off. Okay, so we've covered why storytelling is important and how to do it, but how do we actually keep people engaged? How do we make sure they listen to the whole story?
That's a great question, and it leads us to the last part of the video, which is about making your storytelling interactive.
Interactive. Okay.
Yeah, it's not just about you talking. It's about creating a dialogue with your listener.
So how do we do that?
Well, one way is to ask open-ended questions throughout your story.
So instead of just giving information, I should ask questions.
Exactly. It gets people thinking and involved in the story.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's like turning a passive audience into active participant.
Right. And you never know what kind of interesting answers you might get.
Okay, I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah.
What else?
The video also talked about encouraging feedback and reactions from your listener.
So it's not just about asking questions, but actually listening to the answers.
Yes. It shows your listener that you care about what they think and that you value their input.
It's like building a story together.
Exactly. It makes storytelling a shared experience.
This is all so insightful. I'm feeling much more confident about using storytelling in my conversations.
It's really amazing how such a simple thing like sharing stories can have such a big impact on how we communicate and connect with each other.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about why storytelling is important, how to do it, and even some of the challenges. But let's take a moment to recap the key takeaways from this video.
Sounds good.
What were they again?
Well, the first one is understanding the power of storytelling. Stories aren't just entertainment. They're powerful tools for connecting with people, persuading them, and helping them understand things.
Okay, that's a good one. What's next?
Structure your stories effectively. A good story has a clear beginning, middle, and end, just like a good recipe.
Right, structure is key. What else?
Embrace those tips for improvement. There's so many little things you can do to make your stories better. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Okay, I'm ready to experiment. What's the next one?
Overcome challenges confidently. It's okay to be nervous or feel self-conscious, but remember, everyone has a unique voice, and being authentic is what matters.
Love it. And the last key takeaway.
Engage with your audience. Storytelling is a two-way street. Ask questions, encourage feedback, create a shared experience.
Okay, I think we got them all.
We did. It's clear that storytelling is a skill that can be learned and improved with practice.
Absolutely. And the cool thing is that we all have stories to tell. It's just a matter of finding our voice and being brave enough to share our experiences.
That's a perfect segue into the video's final question.
Ooh, what was it?
What's your favorite story to tell?
That's a good one. It really makes you think. What are the stories that mean the most to us? What experiences have shaped who we are?
And maybe it'll inspire us to share those stories with others, to connect on a deeper level and create more understanding and empathy in the world.
I love that. It's a reminder that we all have the power to touch people's lives with our stories, to connect with them, and to make a difference.
It's a powerful thought. It makes you realize that storytelling is a gift that we can all cultivate and share.
I think this is a good place to pause for now. We've covered so much ground, and I need a minute to absorb it all.
Me too. This has been a great conversation, and I'm feeling inspired to revisit some of my favorite stories and maybe even try out some of these new techniques we talked about.
Same here. And to everyone listening, we encourage you to do the same. Think about that question. What's your favorite story to tell? And see where it takes you. You might be surprised by the power of your own voice and the impact your stories can have.
We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into the world of storytelling. Until then, keep those stories flowing.
You know, we tend to think of storytelling like it needs to be this big performance.
Yeah.
Like you need a stage and a spotlight. It can feel a little intimidating.
Yeah, totally. Like, who wants to hear about my boring day?
Exactly.
The cool thing about storytelling is that it doesn't have to be this grand production.
Okay.
It's about those little moments, the small things that make us who we are.
So it's more about like the emotional truth of the story.
Those everyday stories that we share with friends, like while we're waiting in line,
Uh-huh.
those are the ones that connect with people because they're relatable.
Right. It reminds us that we're all kind of going through the same things.
Exactly. It's like each story is like a thread.
Okay.
And when we share them, we're weaving this big tapestry of human experience.
I love that analogy.
It's beautiful. And it actually reminds me of something you mentioned about wanting to improve your conversational skills in English.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I just can't find the right words or my accent gets in the way.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
But think about it this way. Your experiences,
Mm-hmm.
your perspective, your voice, those are all valuable.
So you're saying my accent is actually a good thing?
Yes. It makes your stories unique.
Yeah.
And remember, the video talked about embracing your unique voice.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in wanting to sound perfect.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But those little imperfections are what make us interesting. They're part of our story. And storytelling is about connection, not perfection.
That's a good point. I think I sometimes worry too much about what people will think.
I get it. But remember, the video said to start small.
Right.
You don't have to tell these big, epic stories.
So baby steps.
Exactly. Maybe just share a funny story with a friend or talk about your day. The more you practice, the more confident you'll become.
What about that tip about recording yourself?
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. It's like having your own personal coach. You can listen back and see what you want to improve, like your pacing or your pronunciation.
That's a really good idea. Okay, so we've talked about finding the magic in everyday stories and embracing our voices. But what about connecting with the audience?
Right. The best storytellers are the ones who make their audience feel like they're part of the story.
How do we do that?
Well, one way is to ask open-ended questions.
Uh-huh.
Instead of just giving information, you invite your listener to think and share their own ideas.
So it's like we're creating the story together.
Exactly. And you never know what kind of interesting conversations might come up.
That's cool. What else can we do?
The video also mentioned encouraging feedback and reactions from your listener.
So it's not just about asking questions, but really listening to the answers.
Exactly. It shows that you care about what they think and that you value their input.
It's about creating a shared experience.
Yes. And that shared experience, that connection, that's what makes storytelling so powerful.
I'm starting to see storytelling as more than just communication. It's about connecting with people on a deeper level.
Exactly. And, this is especially important for you as you're learning English.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Imagine all the connections you could make, all the friendships you could build, if you embrace the power of storytelling to bridge that language gap.
That's a really powerful thought. It's like storytelling could open up a whole new world for me.
It could. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being authentic, being vulnerable, and sharing your story, even if it's not perfect.
I love that message. So what stood out to you the most from this part of the video?
For me, it's that reminder that storytelling isn't just about big adventures or amazing accomplishments. It's about finding the magic in everyday life.
I like that. And it reminds me that we all have story to tell.
We do. And as we continue our deep dive, let's keep that in mind. The power to connect, to inspire, to change things, it's all within us, just waiting to be shared through storytelling.
It's funny how we don't always see our own stories as like interesting, you know?
Yeah, we think our lives aren't exciting enough.
Right. Like who wants to hear about that time I spilled coffee all over myself? But I bet those are the stories people connect with.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's those little relatable moments that remind us we're all human.
Like that time, I think we were all trying to find that new ramen place.
Yeah,
And we got totally lost and ended up having a picnic in the park.
I remember that. It wasn't some big adventure, but it's a story we still talk about.
Exactly. And it's those kinds of stories that make the best conversations. Which reminds me, I'm trying to get better at speaking English.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like I need to have these perfect stories ready to go.
Yeah.
But the video said to embrace your unique voice.
And it's so true. Your accent, your experiences, they all become part of your story.
So instead of trying to hide those things, I should use them.
Yeah. Like imagine telling that story about getting lost,
Uh-huh.
but you add in the parts where maybe you couldn't remember the English word for something.
Or I said something that didn't make sense because of my culture.
Exactly. Those details make your story even more interesting.
I never thought about it like that. It's like turning my weaknesses into strength.
It is. And it shows that you're being genuine and real.
That's a really cool way to think about it. So we've talked about the science of storytelling, structure of a good story, and even how to overcome our fears.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
And I'm realizing that the best stories are often the ones we don't think are worth telling.
It's true. The power of storytelling is all around us in our everyday lives.
I'm feeling really inspired to start sharing my own stories more.
Me too. So what's one thing you're taking away from all of this?
I think for me, it's that connection is more important than perfection.
I like that.
Yeah.
What about you? What are you excited to try?
I want to start using storytelling more in everyday conversations.
Yeah, not just like in big presentations, but like when you're just hanging out with friends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It'll be fun to see what happens.
I think you'll be amazed by the connections you make.
I can't wait. And to everyone listening, we encourage you to do the same. Embrace the power of storytelling. Share your experiences and see where it takes you.
There are so many stories waiting to be told. Go out there and share yours.
That's it for this deep dive into the world of storytelling. We'll be back soon with more explorations to help you learn and grow. Until then, keep those stories flowing.